Well, Geek, welcome back to our Sherlock discussions. Today we're here to talk about Sherlock Season 4, Episode 2, The Lying Detective. Now, before I give you my thoughts on this episode, I want to start this episode with your basic thoughts.
Can I ask you a question? As I recall, you haven't seen this before. Is that correct? So this is your first time watching it,
Yes, that's correct. I've never seen this episode before today.
right? Because I haven't rewatched it since it was originally on. So that was maybe 6 or 7 years ago, something like that. And in the opening scene, uh, because I remembered the twist, I was just focusing on the camera angles of that character's face and how all they do the little cuts like that, and she's looking away and there's like shadows over her eyes. So I was more distracted by trying to pick things up than I was following the plot. But in saying that, I don't think there was much plot to particularly follow.
Look, I'm not going to say I hated everything about this episode. I kind of liked two things about it. I
Mm.
kind of liked seeing John back in therapy again, and I liked seeing how he was dealing with the death of Mary. And speaking of Mary, basically throughout this entire episode, John has an inner dialogue with himself. But his darker conscience or his better conscience, or his conscience that realizes that he has to make peace with Sherlock is basically the incarnation of Mary. So basically when he has conversations with himself, you see Mary talking to him.
Yep.
So I thought that was a very interesting angle to this episode. What I didn't like about the episode is I hated the editing choices about this episode. I could not for the life of me stand the way this episode was edited. Specifically, once we sort of met the main bad guy of this episode, this celebrity that
Mm.
creates this drug that allows individuals to relax and to forget things. I was like, there was something about his face that I just wanted to hit him.
I love the actor. He's a guy called Toby Jones. He's been in a lot. I mean, he's done Marvel. He's been in a lot of stuff. But yeah, I didn't enjoy him in this. It seemed that his character was sort of a mix of different celebrities. Some of them, most of them, you probably wouldn't know because they were like British TV presenters. But yeah, for him being so, or at least I think he's so good, they kind of wasted him in this for me.
I felt that Stephen Moffat, who wrote this episode, wanted to make him a bigger threat than he was. And towards in the third act of this episode, they floated a theory, or John. No, it wasn't John. It was Mycroft who floated a theory about a third Holmes sibling, and I was like, "Wait a minute! Are you telling me that the evil guy in this episode is supposed to be the third Holmes sibling?" But when he turned out not to be, I was like, "That was interesting," and that to me was the most interesting part of this episode because you indicated in our last episode when I brought up the question about the girl on the bus, you were like,
Mm-hmm.
"The girl on the bus is going to come back," and I love the way that it came back, and also I love the way that this episode sort of was a perfect circle because, like you mentioned, it started with the gun barrel sequence, and it ended with finding out who who pulled the trigger in the gun barrel sequence. With all that being said, I just didn't. I found this episode to be very, very, very frustrating. I had trouble. I had trouble understanding what the main villain of this episode wanted from Sherlock, except that he wanted to kill him. I I didn't feel the over. I didn't understand why Sherlock was acting the way he was acting until the very end. So that was very frustrating to me.
Yeah, what I think is if you look at the two sort of villains in this episode, I think that at least one of them may have been planned to be like the big villain if they got another season, and then they just had to create the other one to tie it together. So I don't know if it was the other Holmes sibling that was created to tie it up, or it was what's the guy's name, Culvert Smith or something like that, who
Yeah, Culverton Smith. Yeah.
yeah, who's like the big sort of media giant businessman. But yeah, it just felt like there was a lot of things that were probably ideas that were taken off a whiteboard, and they just put them all into this episode.
The other thing that bothered me, and let me know how you feel about this, when Sherlock basically when Sherlock and John have that big scene in the morgue, and Sherlock goes nuts, and I thought that he had finally lost his rocker. I thought that he had lost, and I thought that he had gone insane. But when Sherlock goes to the hospital, it really pissed me off that Mycroft didn't come to see him. Mycroft, check this out. Mycroft is supposed to be the hand of the British government. So how in the world did Mycroft not come and see him? How could he let his brother sit there at the hands of a lunatic?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I think, though, there's a scene at the start of the episode where Mycroft contacts Watson and says,
Okay.
if he comes to see you, let me know. So I think he's only concerned about where he is and what he's doing, not what's being done to him. You know, if Mycroft thought that there was, this is just my opinion, if Mycroft thought that there was any chance that Sherlock would do something that was against his interests, he would do something about it, but he might think that Sherlock's capable enough to get himself out of, well, not this situation, but a variety of situations.
Do you think that that Mycroft at some point in this episode figured out that the real villain here was their sister, who they never talked about before? Do you think that he was aware that that was coming, or?
I don't think the writers were aware that that was coming. Like I say, I think it was maybe another storyline, and they've just put it all together.
Okay.
But yeah, I think because they never really mention what the age difference is between Sherlock and Mycroft, I don't think, but he might have known that something was out there, and he does seem like one of these guys that he's always got a plan for something, so maybe it's a look in the back of his head, but again, with the writing on this and how it was sort of put together, it didn't feel like any of the villains were solid characters for me.
I really liked the reveal at the end, but I didn't like 98% of the story with the main sort of talk show host villain guy, because like I said before, I didn't feel the overall threat of his villain compared to the one that we got at the end.
Mm-hmm.
The other interesting thing that I liked about this episode is the way that John Watson dealt with his grief. I mentioned it at the start. I thought it was very, very interesting technique that you had John basically talking to himself, and that half of his consciousness was Mary. So you would see that happen throughout the episode. So I thought that was an interesting thing. And for him to have that emotional moment with Sherlock at the end of the episode where he basically tells Mary, or he tells himself, that he cheated on Mary with this woman on a bus. I thought that was very impactful. And later on, I think that scene hits even harder because we find out who the woman on the bus is.
Yeah. The Watson stuff is probably my favourite stuff in the episode, because the sort of initial setup with Sherlock and where he is, and he's living with that homeless guy, and then the other villain kind of shows up, but he doesn't know who it is. The scenes when they were spending time together in London, I was just a little bit bored by it. He was explaining things, but he was explaining things as an audience that we already knew, so it didn't really make sense to me.
That sort of goes to my point about this episode. So many things in this episode I didn't care about. Like if they would have stuck with John dealing with his emotional stuff and brought Sherlock in occasionally, I thought that would have been interesting. But it was kind of cool to see Benedict Cumberbatch play someone who was out of control for a large part of this episode. I mean, in one part, he almost shot Mrs. Hudson, which scared the shit out of me. But the funniest part was when John showed up to the loft and he saw Mrs. Hudson's car. I think it was like what was it, Jaguar or something like that?
Something
and he goes,
like that, yeah.
"Is that your car? Yeah, is that your car?" And then she goes, "Oh, just a refresher. My ex-husband was a drug dealer. I have money."
Yes, because you mentioned
I have properties around London. Yeah, I have properties around London. I am so much more than just your housekeeper.
Mm.
So I really I enjoyed that. I loved the inclusion of Molly Hooper again. I love Molly. I don't think that she gets enough to do.
Yeah,
Like
she's throughout the season,
her,
she's not getting enough to do.
yeah, her and Lestrade. I love
Mm.
them, and I every time they show up, I just get I just get a smile on my face, and I don't think that they particularly give them a lot to do throughout the series. I'm a little bit worried about how they're gonna they're gonna deal with this because Sherlock came to the conclusion way too late, and it looks like Sherlock's sister. It's funny saying that he has a sister, being that we're in the final season and we're one episode away from the finale, and we're like, what? It's going to be very interesting to see how they get out of this. Like, I don't I don't think he's going to be dead, or if he is, that'll be really interesting. And to just see Sherlock go against his sister and to see Mycroft to deal with this thing. But again, I don't think that's going to happen. You know, but I don't know. Let me ask you something. When you saw this episode back in the day and you got to the ending, what were your feelings on it?
I don't remember how I felt about the ending particularly. Well, no, I think it's probably the way that I felt today is once you know the twist, you kind of can't rewatch it and enjoy it at the same level. It's weird that it's not like the usual suspects of the Sixth Sense, whereas if there's only one big twist and that's it. But in this episode, it felt like there was several twists, even though it was just one, because it was it was one person pretending to be many people. I was just shocked at obviously the revelation that they've got a sister that's never been mentioned, even though I think there's been 2 episodes where we've seen the Holmes' parents.
But what other episode did they show up in?
There was one, I think it was the Christmas episode where they were, Sherlock and Watson were at his parents for dinner, or was it?
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. In the Christmas episode,
yes, because Mycroft was
right.
on it. Yeah, I was thinking it might have been Watson's wife, but it's not. It's yes, because Mycroft's there. Yeah.
When they did this episode, did they already know that the next episode was going to be the last one, or were they not told?
I think they announced it maybe a couple of days or a week afterwards. I think I'm not 100% correct on that. Sure, I'm right on that. But I think a lot of fans knew with the careers that Benedict Cumberbatch had and Martin Freeman had, because they were both in Marvel and they were both doing huge things. And I think Benedict Cumberbatch had already been up for an Oscar at this point, that they probably weren't going to come back, or if they were, it'd probably be like every 2 or 3 years.
Okay. So with that in mind, if you had to get into the head of Stephen Moffat and Mark Gatiss, what do you think they were thinking about when they came up with this idea?
I think they were trying to wrap it up, because if they'd had the idea to do it earlier on, you know, they would have done it and she would have just popped up in the background in certain scenes, or they could have, I don't know, at the time they could have digitally inserted her or something like that. But an idea that they had probably for the next season or the season after that, and it just was all forced into the blender for these 2 last episodes.
With that being said, what are you looking forward to in the final episode of Sherlock?
I honestly can't remember it. I say I've only watched this one and the last one once. There's one particular shot that I remember that I want to see how it's done, but I can't talk about it without ruining it for you. Like, it's like the bus thing, if you know what I mean. Like, once you see it, you know. But there's a scene where, I'm trying to think how I can describe it without ruining it. There's a scene where Sherlock goes to touch something and it's not there.
Okay.
And as a viewer, you're kind of like, oh, okay, like, how did they do that? So I'm interested to watch that back, but again, I can't. If you've seen the episode, you'll know what I'm talking about, but I can't talk about it to yourself, obviously, without ruining it. I don't want to ruin anything for you.
One more thing before we pop off here. I really liked the reference to Irene Adler giving Sherlock a happy birthday text. I thought that was awesome. Yep. Well, you know, but I guess I'll find out. I hope that reference is a sort of an indication that she'll be a part of the finale. Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I won't set my hopes too high on that one.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm
But
not. I'm trying not.
but yeah, you say nothing. Good.
Mm.
Um, but I'm really happy that we're here at the end because it feels like we've been talking about Sherlock. It feels like we've been talking about Sherlock for about 2 or 3 years now.
Yeah, it's been about a year, I think, just over a year, I think, something like that. Okay, then, so because you've never seen the finale, so what do you hope to see in the finale?
You know what? I did mention it before. I hope. Well, I didn't hope for this, but I think it would be really interesting if John was dead,
Mm.
and if look. This is probably not going to happen, but it would be really interesting if John was dead and we saw Sherlock and Mycroft teaming up to go
Mm.
after this other home sister in the
Okay,
finale
okay.
to sort of avenge the death of John Watson.
Mm. Okay.
Now I know that's not going to happen, but it would be cool. Other than that, I would love to see our supporting characters get like a moment in the final episode. I want to see Lestrade have a moment. I want to see Molly Hooper have a moment, and I want to see Mrs. Hudson do something cool.
Okay. Well,
But I'll tell you what I don't want to happen.
what?
I do not want to see Moriarty again. I don't.
Mm.
I'm like, please do not show that guy again.
Well,
All due respect to the actor, he was great,
mm.
but I think that Stephen Moffat and Mark Gatiss overused him in the series.
I get why they brought him back, but rewatching it, yeah, it doesn't stand up. They could have created a new villain.
Yeah, no, but the other thing is there are so many Arthur Conan Doyle books, and they couldn't pick another villain.
True.
I read Sherlock as a kid
Mm.
in elementary school or in primary school for those people in England, I think. I remember there being other villains, but the fact that every incarnation of Sherlock focuses on Moriarty, it's kind of distressing to me.
Yeah, I think it's just because it's out of all the characters that he faced in the books, Moriarty is the one that they've always adapted on screen. It's like Batman and the Joker. It's like whenever there's a new Batman, you know there's probably going to be a new Joker in the next couple of films.
And for me, that's always been a point of contention, but it's clear that people love Moriarty. In this series, he was played by a brilliant actor who did a wonderful job, but like I said, I think he got overused just a bit. With that being said, guys, before we wrap up, I just want to mention, I just want to say thank you to Geek for coming on to yet another Sherlock discussion
Thanks for
on my
having me.
channel. It's been a pleasure having you here. But if the good folks want to catch up with your adventures online, what would be the best place for them to do that on?
Yeah, if you type in the Geek in Review in YouTube, you'll find my channel, and then on Twitter, I am at the Geeks Reviews, which is all the one word as well.
Awesome. And guys, if you want to talk to me about anything, the best place to find me is also on Twitter. I'm at Creek Fanatic 88. If you go there, you'll see a link. You'll see a link to my link tree, which will give you links to all the amazing stuff that I do. Until next time, as I often say, I'll see you when I see you.
So much happened here, and so much is about to.